can actually look up, for example, Reid Hoffman. In 2019, they were doing all of these conferences where they said elections are a threat to democracy. Elections corrupt democracy because we can't think of democracy as elections anymore. For example, Ukraine has banned elections. We still say we are providing $300 billion of military support to promote democracy in Ukraine, even though they don't have elections. Well, it's because of it's controlled by U.S. institutions. You can look up something called the Red Lines Memo. By the way, on my X account, if you're curious.
So when you say that Ukraine no longer has democracy, essentially what happened is Zelensky was supposed to leave office and he did not. Is that what happened?
Well, they've indefinitely canceled elections. So he is
because of the war. Because
of the war is their argument. Now, we had elections during the Civil War here in the U.S. This is This is not uncommon for countries to be at war and still have elections. The issue is Zelensky is unpopular and not winning in those election polls. And we no longer define democracy as being about elections because elections allow populists to circumvent the consensus of institutions. And if you want to see a great example of this, you can look at something called the Red Lines Memo, which is I think I have it near the top of my X account, or you can look for just the phrase Red Lines Memo. And you will see Zelensky's first month in office, he was given a threat letter effectively by the U.S. State Department, where they had something like 70 U.S.-funded NGOs who wrote a letter to Zelensky ordering him not to cross the below-listed red lines, or else there will be political instability in your country. Now, political instability in the country caused by the U.S. State Department is the reason Zelensky ultimately became president. The 2014 coup in Ukraine was U.S. and U.K. orchestrated political instability to have a January 6th style mob destabilize the government and literally run it out of the country. And they gave him red lines on every single aspect of what he could do as president. Security red lines, cultural red lines, energy policy red lines. What
were these red lines, like cultural red lines?
So, for example, that he could not allow the use of Russian language to be aired on any of the major Ukrainian media channels. This was part of a drive by the U.S. State Department in tandem with the censorship work that started at that same time in order to prevent the sort of affinity, the sort of Russian affinity network that happens because of Russian propaganda spreading from Russian language news sources, and to try to pry the country off of the Russian ethnic faction and have essentially the Ukrainian dialect.
This is in response for what happened in Crimea?
Yes, and Crimea and the Donbass, the whole eastern side breakaway. But this is effectively the long arm of Langley, the long arm of the State Department and CIA, telling Ukrainians that they can't, what kind of language they can use in their own country. Ukraine was effectively forced to transfer over its education ministry to an EU commissioning body so that Russian adjacent mythologies couldn't be taught in the country. They were told what industries they needed to privatize and to block any attempt to maintain sovereign control of those energy assets. This is ultimately what gave rise to the Burisma scandal, by the way, and the Hunter Biden State Department affairs that ran through all of that, which is a whole other fascinating topic, I should add.